My father chose his new wife over calling 911 for me. I used to think things like that only happened in movies, where someone betrays you and you realize you're completely alone. But it happened to me. I was 16. We had moved to Texas a year earlier, right after Dad married Rebecca. She was dazzling, confident, polished, always smelling of lavender and something expensive that hung in the air after she passed. Her smile looked perfect, but it never reached her eyes. After the wedding, the house stopped feeling like mine. Her framed art covered the walls. Her jars with French labels lined the kitchen shelves. Even the smell of bacon in the morning was replaced by green tea. Dad had become part of her world, laughing her laugh, speaking in her tone. He'd tell me, "Haley, you just need to get used to her. Rebecca makes us better." I just tried not to feel invisible. That day started out like any other, a blazing Saturday. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass, and somewhere nearby someone was grilling chicken. Rebecca was rushing through the house, arranging flowers, polishing glasses, checking the lighting. Her book club friends were coming that night, the circle of smart women, as she called them. "Haley, help me hang the lights," she shouted. "You're tall." I didn't want to, but I did anyway. Our old metal ladder stood in the garage, wobbly, squeaky, but Dad always said it would last forever. I set it up in the living room. "Be careful and don't scratch the floor," Rebecca said, swirling a wine glass to check its shine. Step by step, I climbed. The metal creaked beneath me. I hooked one string of lights, then another, then suddenly the ladder shifted. For a split second, everything turned upside down. The ceiling, the light, Rebecca's face, then the floor. I managed to inhale before the impact. The breath left my body. Everything turned white, then gray. Pain roared up my spine like fire. I tried to breathe, nothing. I tried to scream. A rasp came out instead. Rebecca stared at me, frozen. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she asked, her voice more irritated than scared. I tried to answer but couldn't move my lips. I felt only the cold floor beneath my back, and something wrong, deeply wrong, my legs. They were gone. "Don't move," she said, pulling out her phone. Relief flooded me. Finally, 911, but there was no operator's voice, no siren, just her fingers tapping the screen. "Tom," she shouted. "Tom, come here." Dad rushed in, still in his work coveralls, oil stains on his hands. When he saw me on the floor, he went pale. "What happened?" "She fell," Rebecca said sharply. "I think she just scared herself." He knelt beside me. "Haley, talk to me. Where does it hurt?" My legs," I managed to whisper. His eyes widened. "She can't feel her legs." He grabbed for his phone. Rebecca calmly said, "Tom, wait, it might just be shock. No need to panic." He froze. "What?" "You know how expensive ambulances are," she continued smoothly. "Let's wait a minute. She just needs to catch her breath." "But she says she can't feel her legs." "Tom, don't overreact. Remember when I slipped on the ice? I was fine 10 minutes later. Give her time." Their voices blurred together like underwater noise. I tried to shout, but only a breath came out. "Dad, 911, please." He looked at me, then at her, and he put the phone back into his pocket. That moment broke something inside me, more than my spine, my pain, my fear, my voice, all weighed less than her perfect evening. Rebecca leaned closer. "Let's move her to the couch," she said. "If she can stand, it's probably not serious." "No, don't," I gasped, but they lifted me anyway. He held my shoulders, she took my legs. The pain exploded through me like lightning. I screamed raw and loud. "God, Haley, stop screaming." Rebecca snapped. "You'll scare the neighbors." I truly thought I was dying. They laid me on the couch. I trembled, crying, barely breathing. Rebecca wiped the floor with a cloth where I'd fallen. "The book club is in an hour," she said. "If we call an ambulance, everything's ruined." "Rebecca," Dad began. "Look at her. She's fine now." I wasn't fine. I was disappearing. When they finally decided to drive me to an urgent care clinic, I couldn't feel anything below my waist. Dad carried me to the truck. Every movement stabbed through me. He started the engine, turned on the air conditioner. Rebecca played music softly. "It's okay," she said lightly. "Just breathe." I lay across the back seat, counting my breaths. Every bump felt like fire ripping through my back. They talked about insurance claims and whether the evening could still happen. I cried quietly so they wouldn't hear. The clinic sat between a laundromat and a pizza place. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and melted cheese. When Dad carried me inside, people turned to stare. The receptionist jumped up. "She needs an ambulance now." "We thought it'd be faster to bring her here," Rebecca said. The nurse shouted, "Call 911 immediately." Only then did Dad pull out his phone. I stared at the ceiling tiles while the nurse barked orders. "Why didn't you call sooner?" one of them asked. Rebecca said, "We didn't think it was that bad." "You could have paralyzed her," the nurse snapped. The ambulance siren was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. They slid a brace under me, strapped me down, placed a collar around my neck. The paramedic leaned over. "Can you feel your toes, sweetheart?" "No," I whispered. He nodded gravely. "Hang on, we're almost there." The hospital lights were blinding. Voices shouted instructions. Cold hands moved fast. Machines beeped. Scissors cut fabric. A woman with tired, kind eyes said, "You have a spinal fracture pressing on your spinal cord. We have to operate now." "Will I walk again?" I asked. She looked straight at me. "We'll do everything we can, but you came in late. Every minute matters." They wheeled me toward the operating room. Through the blur, I saw Dad's face in the corridor, gray, hollow, Rebecca beside him, texting. And then everything went black. When I woke up, my body felt foreign. There were tubes in my throat, metal under my skin. I couldn't move. Tears rolled down my cheeks silently. The surgeon said, "We stabilized your spine with rods and screws. The damage is severe, but recovery is possible." "Will I walk?" "We don't know. It'll take time." Dad came that evening. He looked 20 years older. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know what to do." I turned my face away. Rebecca came once. She stood at the doorway, said, "I'm just glad you're okay," and left. A few days later, a detective named Alvarez visited. She listened as I told her everything, from the fall to the endless waiting. When I finished, she said quietly, "This isn't just an accident. This is negligence." The next day, Mom arrived from Arizona. When she saw me, pale with tubes and braces, her face crumpled. I heard her yelling in the hallway, "You left her lying there, for what? For a damn dinner party?" And for the first time since the fall, I cried not from pain, but because someone finally said it out loud. Mom hired a lawyer. They gathered every report, the paramedics, the clinic, the timestamps, 34 minutes between the fall and the 911 call, 34 minutes that changed everything. The doctors said if I'd gotten help sooner, the swelling might have been smaller. Maybe I would already be walking. Rehabilitation started a month later. Every day was a war. Exercises, tears, exhaustion. The therapist kept saying, "You're strong, Haley." But I wasn't strong, I was just angry. Dad visited daily. Sometimes he read aloud. Sometimes he just sat there. I couldn't look at him. All I saw was the man holding a phone and choosing silence. Rebecca never came again. Mom said they'd been fighting. One morning, a police officer came with papers. "We're moving forward with charges," he said. I asked, "Criminal?" "Possibly negligence causing bodily harm." I didn't know how to feel. Justice didn't fix bones. Months passed. I learned to stand with braces, then with a walker. Each step burned. Sometimes I collapsed and cried until Mom lifted me back up. She'd whisper, "You're still here. That's what matters." Dad still came. He said he'd left Rebecca. "I finally saw who she is," he told me. I stayed silent because he'd realized it too late. When the trial began, I could walk short distances. The courtroom was cold. Rebecca sat upright, chin high. Dad beside her, fists clenched. The judge asked, "Why didn't you call 911? Rebecca never once looked in my direction. She sat there perfectly still, like the whole thing was a misunderstanding. Like I had invented the pain, the walker, the metal rods in my spine. Her lawyer stood and said, "My client acted with good intentions. She had no way of knowing the fall would lead to such consequences." Good intentions. Those words cut deeper than the surgery, because I remember lying on the floor begging her to call. I remember her wiping the spot where I hit my head so her guests wouldn't see. I remember her saying, "Stop screaming, Haley, you're ruining the mood." When the judge turned to my father, he didn't speak at first. He stood up, trembling. I didn't realize how serious it was, he said quietly. I trusted Rebecca. The judge repeated, You trusted her, but not your daughter. Dad broke down right there in court. Tears rolled down his face. For a second, I wanted to feel sorry for him, but all I felt was empty. Rebecca got probation and a fine. Dad was found guilty of negligence without aggravation. The judge said his actions were driven by fear and influence. It didn't sound like justice, just words. After the trial, Dad moved into a tiny apartment outside town. He kept calling, texting, asking to meet. I ignored him for weeks, then finally agreed. Maybe not for him, but for me. When I walked in, he was standing by the window, shoulders hunched, holding a chipped mug of coffee. Hi, he said. You look older. I didn't answer. He sat down and pulled out a letter. I wrote this, but I wanted to say it to your face. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand. I was scared of losing control, of ruining everything, and I chose wrong. I stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You didn't choose wrong, Dad. You chose her book club. He flinched but didn't argue. Yes, he whispered, and by doing that I killed something between us. We sat in silence for a while. Rain tapped against the window. I didn't feel hatred anymore, just exhaustion. The betrayal had long since hardened into a scar. When I got up to leave, he said, I don't want you to remember me like this. I looked at him. Too late, I said. But maybe someday I'll remember you differently. Life after the accident was nothing like before. I had to finish school online. I couldn't manage the hallways or stairs. Friends drifted away. A few called at first, then stopped. Maybe they didn't know what to say. I wasn't that funny girl from the soccer team anymore. I was the girl who almost died. Physical therapy was torture. Every morning I woke at 6, strapped myself into braces, practiced standing. Every day felt like starting over. I fell, cried, and got back up. Sometimes I thought about giving up, but then I'd remember that day, the floor, the silence, my father's hesitation, and I'd push harder. Mom was always there. She quit her job to take care of me, cooked, drove me to therapy, endured my anger. One night, when I woke up sobbing from pain, she sat beside me and said, Everything you feel is real. Don't hide it. A year later, I took my first unaided step. My left leg obeyed, my right dragged behind, but I stood. I cried and laughed at the same time. Mom filmed it, tears streaming down her face, but the victory didn't last. A month later, the phantom pain started, burning through my spine at night. I'd lie awake hearing echoes, Rebecca's cold voice, my father's silence. The same scene replayed again and again. The therapist called it PTSD. Time, he said, would help. But time doesn't heal when you remember every second in detail. When I turned 18, I applied to college. I chose psychology, not because I wanted to help others, but because I wanted to understand how people could do what they did to me, how convenience could matter more than compassion. I moved to a new city, rented a small room. Sometimes when I heard sirens outside, my chest tightened. I'd think, someone's being saved right now, and I'd wonder, if someone had saved me sooner, how different my life would be. I never saw Rebecca again. But 2 years later, I came across her name in an article. She'd opened her own real estate agency. In the photo, she was smiling, radiant, confident. The caption read, Successful, inspiring, unstoppable. I stared at her picture for a long time, not angry, just hollow. The world would never know what her smile cost. A few years later, Dad asked to meet again. We met in a small roadside cafe. He looked tired, older, his hands shaking slightly as he stirred his tea. I divorced her, he said. Rebecca moved to Dallas. I'm working at a mechanic shop now. Just living. I nodded. He took out another envelope. This is for you. Inside was a handwritten note. Haley, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know that every night I hear the sound of you falling. I reach for the phone, but it's always too late. I was a coward, and I've lived with that ever since. If someday you can, don't forgive me. Just stop hating me. Hate binds us tighter than love ever could. I folded the paper and said, I don't hate you, Dad. He looked up. Really? Yes, I just can't love you the same way anymore. He started crying. And for the first time, I felt nothing, just peace. Life went on. I studied, wrote essays, joined a support program for trauma survivors. Sometimes people messaged me saying, I listened to your story and now I don't feel so alone. That's when I realized maybe my pain could mean something. Still, inside me lived that 16-year-old girl on the floor. At night, I'd hear her heartbeat, her shallow breaths, the echo of that conversation. Tom, don't call 911, but she can't feel her legs. Wait a little, she'll be fine. And then silence. 5 years passed. I'm 21 now. I walk almost normally. On rainy days, my right leg aches, but I don't complain. I've learned what strength really means, not surviving, but forgiving. Yes, I forgave him. Not because he earned it, but because I deserved peace. Justice can't change the past. Only forgiveness frees you from it. I visit our old house sometimes. The neighbors are new. The ladder is gone. The place looks smaller than I remember. I stand on the spot where I fell, and for once, it doesn't hurt. It's just quiet. Dad died a year after our last meeting. Heart attack. He was 54. The funeral was small. I stood by his grave, holding the same letter he'd written me, and thought, that's it. It's over. Life had punished him more than any court could. He'd spent every day reliving that moment. When everyone left, I stayed behind. The wind moved through the grass. I whispered, you can rest now. And for the first time, I felt like I could rest too. 2 more years passed. I now run a support group for victims of neglect and abuse. Every time someone says they didn't believe me or they didn't help, I hear my own voice in theirs. I tell them, people can fail you, but pain doesn't have to define you. Once, a teenage girl asked me, do you really not feel angry anymore? I smiled. Sometimes I do, but anger is energy. I use it to protect someone else instead of destroying myself. Sometimes at night, I sit with quiet music and write, not for anyone, just for myself, about how love isn't words or promises, it's action, about how one phone call can change everything, about how silence can kill. When I finish each story, I always end it the same way. My father chose his new wife over calling 911 for me. In that one sentence lives everything: betrayal, pain, forgiveness, strength. Because sometimes to truly live again, you have to die once inside and then choose yourself.